Hello, and welcome to American Amnesia. I am your host, Cliff Garner. Trying some new things. I have a new setup where I can hook my mic up through the iPad and telephone, by the way. And I'm experimenting with that right now. See how that works. Christmas has just passed, and we are approaching the New Year's. This will be actually. This is the day before New Year's Eve. So, we're wrapping up the year. Classes are all finished for now, and I'll have some time to maybe put out a couple shows before semester starts, and new classes start, and I hopefully will find some additional work to do, and I need to make more money than I'm looking at right now, unfortunately. Oh, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. I do like to be useful too, so making more money and doing more things and fulfilling more of what I need to do, I think is always good, and hopefully it'll give me enough money and time to do more online as well. I'm hoping so. I'm also hoping to get into more music. I've been more seriously studying this past year and my music, and I enjoy what I've done. I play. I'm playing better on the guitar. I'm doing a little bit on the ukulele. I picked up a nice slide for my lap steel, and actually I'm taking to it very quickly, which is really pretty funny. I also been doing some things with alternative tunings on guitar, and so I've really been learning. I have problems with the bar chords, but other than that, I'm actually not too bad. I'm playing some songs. I'm learning some things. I wanted to blow the chords out of my voice. I'm actually primarily a singer anyway, and it gets some of that out. I'd actually like to play again, front a band, write songs, write lyrics, and sing them, express them, belt them. I'm not a quiet singer. I'm very loud. Matter of fact, I think I'm more expressive as a vocalist than I am as really just about anything else outside of maybe being a teacher. But I do love to teach, and I do enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to the next semester coming up. And I need more income, really. Partly from living in Illinois, although some of the problems in Illinois are endemic to education, particularly in college, teaching college, that they hire you as an adjunct, but they won't hire you on as a full professor, because then they'd have to take care of your health care. And so I've had my experience with Obamacare, such as it is, and I'm signed up. I mean, I don't have any choice. I went without insurance and got sick early this year. Yeah, that would have been in May, and it about took me. I'm fortunate to be alive, so and I don't discount that. So at any rate, there's so many things that have been going on, and people, they say, well, there is no deep state. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. This is the unelected part of the state. This is the people that are actually making sure that there's perpetuity and there's continuity between one administration to the next, and there isn't that much change. I mean, there's change, but there's not that much. And they're the bureaucrats, the faceless people that are underneath the political appointments that make sure the whole thing runs. And the problem is they are thoroughly corrupt. No question about the corruption. You can see what's going on. And if you're paying any attention to what's going on in the news pertaining to so-called Russiagate, and you're seeing what's going on as far as the whole one-sided investigation. I mean, the travesty that's there. If you don't see it, you don't want to see it. I mean, you've had 2 years, and if you're blinding yourself to this, then that's your fault. And I really don't. I don't feel very sorry for you at all. But those of us that have been paying attention and even looking at things like Q, there's I love and adore H.A. Goodman. He is one of my absolute favorite people on YouTube. He is one of my favorite sources for analysis of the news. But I do not agree with him on Q. And it's really kind of funny because when I come to the same place where he is, and I understand where he comes from, and I'm not knocking it at all, because what he's saying is that don't rely on the plan or anything of this sort. Do something. Make your voice heard. Say what you think needs to be done. If you think that the president should release the declassifications, get loud. Say it. I say it over and over and over and over again. Declassify this stuff, Mr. President. And I write. I haven't written him. I probably should, but I have written my congressman. I have done these things to support him and to say what I think. I write to people here in the state saying why I disagree with the things that the Democrats are proposing and why I do. And I tell my local guy, who's Republican by the way, I let him know. I say, hey, I support you. Don't bend. Don't buy this garbage that Bannigan's trying to pull. Resist him. Fight him. Let's get the feds in and investigate these bastards. And, I understand what he's saying, and I agree 100%. And I say to you, do the same thing. Be heard. Stand up. Don't be afraid. Don't let them push you around. If they push you, push them back. It's time we started pushing them back harder. As a matter of fact, it might come to blows. And if so, so be it. I'm sick to death of what I've been hearing, and I'm sick to death of what I've been seeing, and what they're doing is wrong. Totally wrong. And the election, and like many other people, I watched it, and it's like, this was a travesty. They stole. The Democrats stole the House. Now, why they couldn't get the Senate? Well, I think it was a little bit more obvious and a little harder to pull off. I mean, even if you have the dead voting for you, there's only so much you can do, and you do have to be careful because you don't want to get caught. It's in not getting caught that's been the Democrats' signal success, and their cynicism about the whole thing is really kind of disgusting. And they're very disingenuous about it. I mean, it's like, well, the dead vote for us, but hey, it needs to stop. And one of the things that came up, and it's kind of making the rounds with the Q people, is this. And it's an executive order from the whitehouse.gov. I will post it in my stuff when I get it up on YouTube. But it's an executive order. It was signed or issued on September 12th, 2018. And it says, the title is Executive Order on Imposing Certain Sanctions in the Event of Foreign Interference in a United States Election. And the thing about this is that if everything is going as it should right now, it is soon to be opened up to the public, and there will probably be direct consequences of their findings in this. And it's very interesting that just now, just the last few days, the announcement by the head of LinkedIn, what is his name? Here, let me pull that up real quick, because I'll also supply this in my notes. LinkedIn founder, election interference. He admitted to, hang on a second. He admitted to interfering in the election, special election of. Yeah. Yeah, he apologizes. Oh, I'm so sorry. I cheated you, and I thought it was the right thing to do. Bastard. Yeah, this is the Independent online. It's a British newspaper. And this kind of thing coming out at this point in time. I mean, it happened a year ago with the special election in Alabama. Well, not a year ago, but it's been quite a while now. And it kept Roy Moore out of office. And the one of the things that was making the Q rounds was that Sessions was at work, and you know, we criticized Sessions, rightfully so, for seemingly not doing a whole lot. But I have suspected that Q was correct, and that he was very quietly in the background doing quite a bit. And if looking into the election fraud here was part of that, he actually wasn't being as useless as we could very well and very rightly assume that he is. And this assumption has a lot of validity. I mean, at least on the surface of it. And we haven't been told that he was doing anything, and you know, we only know what we get told or what we see. Some people are very good at acting things out behind the scenes, and this is a good thing, because that enables them to be highly effective, especially if they're doing something that's controversial or difficult, or that would otherwise be resisted to a very high degree. And I would suspect that a lot of what Sessions may have been doing would come under all three of those categories. And so if he were looking into this election, and now this is all coming out because he wants to try to handle the narrative of it, then that makes it kind of clear that there's some stuff coming down pretty quickly on this, and that the 2018 election and the shenanigans that went on, especially in California, with the voting, what do they call that? Vote harvesting. With that, and with the nonsense that came out of Broward County and out of Georgia and a few other places, that there's going to be repercussions and very possibly arrests. So these two things together, I think, are very significant. And the first one is this billionaire LinkedIn co-founder apologizes for funding a Russian-style disinformation group in Alabama Senate race. And the Democrat supporter Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman is the founder of LinkedIn. He's one of these people from Silicon Valley that's been actually trying to remake the world in his image, and this is what's going on with this stuff with Google and Twitter. Twitter is I had a troll that tried to show me up on Twitter a couple postings ago. And, it's fine. He can have his opinion, but, at the same time, that what's happening to Twitter in the long run is actually going to do him in, and Gab is coming back. And they're building themselves up in a stronger way. And that's because what's going to happen is that there's going to be the creation of alternative platforms. Quite frankly, I think that we shouldn't have the government have a law change. There's no need to change the law because it's become increasingly clear that the laws already governing these Twitter and Facebook and Google and Apple and all of them is that they're platforms and not publishers. Okay, so since that's the case, they can't hide behind this being able to censor as a publisher. They don't have that right. So what we can do is called antitrust action, and they can be broken up just like the telephone companies were. And that would be just fine because it enabled this tech boom that we've been having. It enabled the one before, back in the 90s. And so, by all means, we need it's time for another antitrust action. And since they're abusing their privileges and denying Americans of the ability to speak on the platforms, contrary to law, because they're not publishers that are responsible for what other people say, that they can be busted up, and they should be. And if this is the kind of thing they're going to do, then they should also be able to be sent to jail. There should not be a law for the rich and a law for the poor. And there's certain laws that only the rich can violate, and this is one of them. And they need to pay the penalty. So, billionaire Reid Hoffman apologized Wednesday for funding a group linked to a highly disturbing effort that spread disinformation during last year's Alabama special election for the U.S. Senate, but he said he was not aware that the money was being spent for this purpose. Well, we'll investigate and find out, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman's statement in his first acknowledgement of this ties to a campaign that adopted tactics similar to those deployed by Russian operatives during the 2016 presidential election. Disinformation. Now, who was actually doing that? It's the Democrats. So, they were building on their already gained knowledge. In Alabama, a Hoffman-funded group allegedly used Facebook and Twitter to undermine support for Republican Roy Moore and boost Democrat Doug Jones, who narrowly won the race. And also there were some other things that were done. People from out of state brought in, and illegal aliens that were voting. These are things that have come out, and also with the vote harvesting that occurred this time around, particularly California, and was also trying to be pulled off in Florida and in Georgia. And it may have happened in Arizona. Look out. Mr. Hoffman, an early Facebook investor and co-founder of LinkedIn, also expressed support for a federal investigation into what happened, echoing Mr. Jones' position from last week. Well, Mr. Jones might just end up out of office, too. The Alabama effort was one of a series of multi-million-dollar expenditures Mr. Hoffman made to dozens of left-leaning groups in the aftermath of the 2016 election, when he offered himself to reeling Democrats as a source of some money, connections, and Silicon Valley-style disruption to the staid world of party politics. Mr. Hoffman invested $750,000 in one group, American Engagement Technologies, according at AET, according to a person close to the matter, but not authorized to discuss Mr. Hoffman's spending. Mr. Hoffman's statement on Wednesday referred to AET, which has been linked to a campaign to spread disinformation targeting Mr. Moore, namely saying that he was a pedophile. This is a slander, by the way, and these people might end up in serious problems. I hope they are, because what they did was not only illegal, it was immoral. It was wrong. They shouldn't have done it. But the statement left key facts unaddressed, including a full accounting of everyone who crafted and executed the campaign. Well, he's not going to talk about that. He might end up having to talk about it in court. He might go to jail. Don't take that out of the equation yet. We'll see. I mean, if he doesn't belong in jail, then don't send him there. But if he does, take him down. There shouldn't be a law for the rich and one for the poor. No. The statement left key facts unaddressed, including a full accounting of everyone who crafted and executed the campaign. The effort was the subject of a presentation in September to a group of liberal-leaning technology experts who met in downtown Washington to describe or discuss electoral tactics. According to one of the attendees and documents from the meeting obtained by the Washington Post, the person spoke on the condition of anonymity because those at the gathering were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Okay. Yeah, well, so did what's her name? Stinky Daniels. Mr. Hoffman said in the statement, "I find the tactics that have been recently reported highly disturbing. For that reason, I am embarrassed by my failure to track AET, the organization I did support, and more diligently, as it made its own decisions to perhaps fund projects that I would reject." And, if so, that's, we'll see where it takes us. It will be fair to him. The head of AET, the former Obama administration official and Google engineer Mikey Dickerson, has not responded to numerous requests for comment. Of course he hasn't. He won't either. Mr. Hoffman, he seriously might go to jail. And with him, it's deliberation. Pretty clearly. That's what he did. So anyway, Mr. Hoffman's public apology follows news reports on the effort known as Project Birmingham, which involved the creation of misleading Facebook pages to persuade Alabama conservatives to vote for somebody other than Mr. Moore. One Project Birmingham tactic described in the document said backers had created false online evidence that a network of Russian automated accounts called bots were supporting Mr. Moore. And they were calling us Russian bots. The bots are the Dems. The bots are the Dems. They always project what they do onto their opponents. It just never fails. This is like an alcoholic. In his statement, Mr. Hoffman called this report the most disturbing aspect of the disinformation effort. This and some other key details were first reported in the New York Times. Very, it ain't snowflakes, say what you will. This is actual reportage. They're actually reporting this stuff for a change. It's about time. Of course, they have to change. Otherwise, they're going to get left behind, and they're going to end up entirely irrelevant. And they're getting there. I mean, they're falling apart anyway. But they're trying to maintain a certain amount of relevance before it's all said and done. Mr. Hoffman's statement said AET had provided funding for the New Knowledge, a Texas-based research firm whose CEO, Jonathan Morgan, has acknowledged using disinformation tactics on a small scale, right, it was big. It was big. It made national news. I mean, good grief. Small scale in the Alabama election for a research project. Mr. Morgan has repeatedly denied involvement in the broader efforts described in the news reports. Well, we'll see. Mr. Morgan said on Wednesday that he was not aware of the funding of the work in Alabama, which he portrayed as for research purposes, came from Mr. Hoffman. Research purposes in a live election. No, I don't think so, sir. I think that you actually meddled. Sorry. You are sorry. I can't object strongly enough to the characterization that we were trying to influence an election in any way. Bullshit, Mr. Morgan said. Facebook suspended Mr. Morgan and other... That's how bad it is. Even Facebook suspends him. So it suspended Mr. Morgan and other individuals on Saturday for violating its policies against coordinated inauthentic behavior during the 2017 Alabama election. In his statement, Mr. Hoffman sought to distance himself from the misleading online tactics, saying, I want to be unequivocal. There is absolutely no place in our democracy for manipulating facts or using falsehoods to gain political advantage. Along with donations to party candidates, Mr. Hoffman said that he has backed dozens of organizations. That's a quote. Mr. Hoffman coordinated many of his investments with Investing in the U.S., a group led by Dmitry Melhorn. Dmitry? Russian name. Mr. Hoffman's longtime top political advisor, Mr. Melhorn, said on Wednesday he was not aware of Project Birmingham. Mr. Melhorn previously acknowledged a willingness to experiment with some tactics honed by the Internet Research Agency, the Russian disinformation operation charged with U.S. officials with several crimes for meddling in the U.S. election. You can't make this stuff up. The Internet Research Agency engaged in many, many tactics, some of which I think are inappropriate for us to mirror, and some of which I think we should disavow, Mr. Melhorn said last week. The tactics they engaged in that we need to disavow include misinformation and promoting racial hatred. The tactics we need to mirror are really good social micro-targeting. Through the 2018 election season, Mr. Hoffman directed his cash towards other organizations that aim to target conservatives on Facebook. These groups created pages and purchased ads on the social network with the goal of trying to appeal to the center-right of the political spectrum, Mr. Melhorn said. They sought to get those users' attention on topics including patriotism and sports, and then presented them with real political news stories and policy-focused ads. Right. A lot of propaganda went on this last time around. They were trying to beat us up something fierce. Central to that effort was News for Democracy, which received money from Mr. Hoffman, according to a person with knowledge in the investment, but not authorized to speak on the record. Again, there may be charges involved, and on the record could be held to account. Over the past year, created or promoted false Facebook pages, including Sounds Like Tennessee, the person said. The Facebook page appeared to be about sharing news about college football and local hunters, but it also brought at least one ad that criticized since-elected GOP Senator Marsha Blackburn for her record on opioid abuse, according to Facebook Ad Archive. In total, News for Democracy had a vast reach. Its ads garnered at least 16 million impressions on Facebook over a 2-week period in September, according to researchers at New York University's Tandon School of Engineering. The organization is not required to identify its donors, and Mr. Hoffman declined to comment through an aide. Mr. Melhorn said that he sits on the group's board of directors, and Investigating the U.S. has pitched it as a potential place for Democratic donors to direct their support. Social media tends to drive people and into hyper-partisan camps, said Dan Fletcher, a founder of Motive AI, another Hoffman-backed startup that sought to target political messages to voters on Facebook. Part of what we tried to figure out is whether there's a way you can reach people with facts that stretch beyond just a left versus right dichotomy. One of the ways to do it is to actually use have a political slant that isn't left or right, namely populist. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was this executive order. And the reason why is that this executive order, again, it says executive order imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in an United States election. And this order has some interesting stuff that, I'll go ahead and start reading. By the authority invested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States, blah, blah, blah. I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, find that the ability of persons located in whole or in substantial part outside the United States to interfere in or undermine public confidence in United States elections, including through unauthorized accessing of election and campaign infrastructure or the covert distribution of propaganda and disinformation. Propaganda and disinformation using Russian bots. Yeah, well, I have the feeling that this is going to affect Mr. Jones's election. These things constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat to national security and foreign policy of the United States. Although there has been no evidence of a foreign power altering the outcome or vote tabulation in any United States election, now this was done in September. Foreign powers have historically sought to exploit America's free and open political system. In recent years, the proliferation of digital devices and internet-based communications has created significant vulnerabilities and magnified the scope and intensity of the threat of foreign interference, as illustrated in the 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment. I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with this threat. You heard correctly. I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with this threat. Accordingly, I hereby order so that in the event that this threat is real, there is a national emergency that is now hypothetically in place. Section 1. A. Not later than 45 days after the conclusion of a United States election, the Director of National Intelligence, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate executive departments and agencies, shall conduct an assessment of any information indicating that a foreign government or any person acting as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign government has acted with the intent or purpose of interfering in that election. That could be construed as by putting in foreign persons voting without the right to vote. Hello. It could be construed as a lot of other things too, but it can be construed as that. And if these Russian bots that were working on the stuff with Sessions' old seat are actually Russian, which is entirely possible, I think the Democrats are in pretty serious trouble. And we've just barely scratched the surface of this. Anyway, the assessment shall identify, and remember, it's the CIA, right? Or a national director of DNI. I'm sorry, the DNI, and of course that would include the FBI, CIA, NSA, all of them, all coming together, and anybody else they think that is needed to be brought in, probably FEC, right? And they're all going to make an assessment. The assessment shall identify, to the maximum extent ascertainable, the nature of any foreign interference and any methods employed to execute it. So, not just that they're foreign, but that they're actually manipulating the election. This is all of one piece. The persons involved, right? The methods, the nature of the nature of the interference, any methods employed to execute it, the persons involved, and the foreign government or governments that authorized, directed, sponsored, or supported it. Okay. That touches a lot of bases. And in fact, we could actually construe the caravans as being one of these. So we can now start right off the bat with Venezuela, Honduras, Guatemala, and who else? One other country. But all of them is being in cahoots on that. That manipulation, in and of itself, may have something to do with it. So this is pretty serious stuff here. The Director of National Intelligence shall deliver this assessment and appropriate supporting information to the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. B. Within 45 days of receiving the assessment and information described in Section 1A of this order, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate agencies and, as appropriate, state and local officials, shall deliver to the President, the Secretary... Florida. Oh, big time. Shall deliver to the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Treasury, and the Secretary of Defense, a report evaluating with respect to the United States election that this is the subject of the assessment described in Section 1A. Small I, first, the extent to which any foreign interference that targeted election infrastructure materially affected the security or integrity of that infrastructure, the tabulation of votes, or the timely transmission of election results. Timely transmission of election results? How long did the Democrats hold on to all those ballots? How long did it take them to flip almost all of California? Ooh. And, 2, if any foreign interference involved activities targeting the infrastructure of or pertaining to a political organization, campaign, or candidate, the extent to which such activities materially affected the security or integrity of that infrastructure, right, the actual process too, including by the unauthorized access to, disclosure or threatened disclosure of, or alteration or falsification of information or data, namely your vote. What happened to all those votes of all those servicemen that came in? Think they got all counted? Bet they didn't. The report shall identify any material issues of fact with respect to these matters that the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security are unable to evaluate or reach agreement on at the time the report is submitted. Okay? So they're going to pick it apart at the submission of the report. The report shall also include updates and recommendations. So it's going to be ongoing. and it probably has been since the election itself on the 5th of November, I think it was, 4th November, when appropriate, regarding remedial actions to be taken by the United States government other than the sanctions described in sections 2 and 3 of this order. We haven't gotten there yet. C. All relevant agencies shall transmit to the Director of National Intelligence any information relevant to the execution of the Director's duties pursuant to this order, as appropriate and consistent with applicable law. If relevant information emerges after the submission of the report mandated by Section 1A of this order, the Director, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate agencies, shall amend the report as appropriate, and the Attorney General and Secretary of Homeland Security shall amend the report required by Section 1B as appropriate. Right, 1B was that last section we just talked about, which talks about putting the report together. Right? Where am I? Just a sec. Here we go. D. Nothing in this order shall prevent the head of any agency or any other appropriate official from tendering to the President at any time through an appropriate channel any analysis, information, assessment, or evaluation before interference in a U.S. election. So he's basically allowed to be kept up to date on it. He knows what's going on with it. He's probably tipped his hand a little bit here and there. You kind of read between the lines sometimes. And with him, it's actually kind of interesting how that works. He's not ragging as being that great communicator, but he does have there's a method to his madness. It's kind of interesting. If information indicating that foreign interference in a state, tribal, or local election within the United States has occurred is identified. It's tribal too. Right? It may be included as appropriate in the assessment mandated by Section 1A of this order, or in the report mandated by Section 1B of this order, or submitted to the President in an independent report. So, all this, just another way of getting him the information. F, if not later than 30 days following the date of this order, the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, the Attorney General, Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence shall develop a framework for the process that will be used to carry out their respective responsibilities pursuant to this order, not later than 30 days after the order. So this is September to October. So the framework was already put in place then. Okay? Just so you're clear on this. The framework, which may be classified in whole or in part, and by the way, the 45 days after the election probably is still ongoing, because there's still, I think, an election in North Carolina or is it South, one or the other, that still hasn't finished yet. And there's also just one that just finished up in Maine. So there's still probably tabulations going on in these reports that probably haven't been turned in just yet. And they're, they might be rushed in, but they're trying to. But like I said, there's 45 days after each one of these. So it's something to keep in mind. There's a time lag from the time of the election to the time that this is all put together, and even possibly could be put into play. 45 days would be about the 20th of December. So just really not too long ago. Think about that. It's interesting. 45 days. Okay, so anyway, back to here. The framework, which may be classified in whole or in part, shall focus on ensuring that agencies fulfill their responsibilities pursuant to this order in a manner that maintains methodological consistency, protects law enforcement or other sensitive information and intelligence sources and methods, maintains an appropriate separation between intelligence functions and policy and legal judgments, ensures that the efforts to protect electoral processes and institutions are insulated from political bias, and respects the principles of free speech and open debate. Unlike the Democrats. Section 2. All property and interests in property that are in the United States that hereafter come within the United States, or that are hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person or of the following persons, are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. And this is the list of the types of persons they're talking about. Any foreign person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. 1. To have directly or indirectly engaged in, sponsored, concealed, or otherwise been complicit in foreign interference in the United States election. 2. To have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support or goods or services to or in support of any activity described in subsection A1 of this section, or any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, or 3, to be owned or controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act for, on behalf of, directly or indirectly, any person whose property or interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. Okay, so what they're doing is that they're putting claims on the assets of these people that may have something to do with any kind of interference whatsoever within an election in the United States, and particularly foreign persons. B. Executive Order 13694 of April 1st, 2015 is amended by Executive Order 13757 of December 28th, 2016. These are both under Obama. Remains in effect. This order is not intended to and does not serve to limit the Secretary of the Treasury's discretion to exercise the authorities provided in Executive Order 13694. Where appropriate. Okay, so these are some of the things that Obama was actually trying to use to basically keep Trump from taking his seat, the December 28th stuff. But the one from the 2015 was done in advance. So what he was seeing was actually that he wanted to interfere with Trump. Well, there are things within that arrangement that Mr. Trump finds worthy of using, and I haven't looked at that one. I'm just making a point here that these were in place with Obama, those two executive orders that he's talking about, and he's not abridging anything about those. He's only slightly modifying them. And it says that where appropriate, the Secretary of Treasury, in consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, may exercise the authorities described in Executive Order 13694 or other authorities in conjunction with the Secretary of the Treasury's exercise of authorities provided in this order. So he's making sure that there is no further hindrance on his people through this being pursued, this executive order, or the enforcement of it becoming pursued. C. The prohibitions in subsection A of this section apply except to the extent provided by statutes or in regulations, orders, directives, or licenses that may be issued pursuant to this order, following, and notwithstanding any contract entered into or any license or permit granted prior to the date of this order. So they're showing the time frame of this, right? Section 3, following the transmission of the assessment mandated by Section 1A and the report mandated by Section 1B. A. The Secretary of the Treasury shall review the assessment mandated by Section 1A and the report mandated by Section 1B, and in consultation with the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Secretary of Homeland Security, impose all appropriate sanctions pursuant to Section 2A of this order and any appropriate sanctions described in Section 2B of this order, and B. Okay? The Secretary of State and the Secretary of Treasury, in consultation with the heads of other appropriate agencies, shall jointly prepare a recommendation for the President as to whether additional sanctions against foreign persons may be appropriate in response to the identified foreign interference, and in light of the evaluation of the report mandated by Section 1B of this order, including as appropriate and consistent with the applicable law, propose sanctions with respect to the largest business entities licensed or domiciled within the country whose government authorized, directed, sponsored, or supported election interference, including at least one entity from each of the following sectors: financial services, defense, energy, technology, and transportation, or if inapplicable to that, the country's largest business entities, sectors of comparative strategic significance to that foreign government. And pay attention to, right now, you have that stuff with Huawei, that big Chinese company that deals with the communications, and that they've been doing all this spying for the Chinese government. That is significant also in terms of this stuff here. And I want you to see that this is covering what's foreign. There are laws in place already dealing with federal election law that will deal with things that are out of the ordinary. So what you're seeing is actually building up to some kind of a report being made and being delivered, and it may have already been done. If so, then we may see the results from this very soon. I'm not saying that you will. I'm not saying you won't. But there's this peculiar timing of that billionaire with LinkedIn, with Huawei's owner, and this coming around. This is making the rounds right now with certain people that I consider fairly reputable, that are dealing with the Q stuff. And because of that, I think that we can get something of a glimpse of what's going on behind the scenes. And I think this elucidates it very well. And I think you can see why I'm going into this. But yeah, the financial areas. I'll repeat that because I find that interesting. Let me back it up just a hair. Yeah, I have to back it all the way up. This B, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the heads of other appropriate agencies, shall jointly prepare a recommendation for the President as to whether additional sanctions against foreign persons may be appropriate in response to the identified foreign interference and in light of the evaluation mandated by Section 1B of this order, including as appropriate and consistent with applicable law. They're not going out of their way on the law. To propose sanctions with respect to the largest business entities licensed or domiciled in a country, right? The domicile, they are resident there, licensed there, right? This is the flag they fly, right? Whose government authorized, directed, sponsored, or supported election interference, including at least one entity from each of the following sectors. All right, these are the type of businesses they're talking about. Financial services, banks, all kinds of stuff there, but banks in particular. Defense, military, energy, technology, including communications, and transportations, or if inapplicable to that country's largest business entities, sectors of comparable strategic significance for that foreign government. So whatever, some countries, all that would be strategic would probably be agriculture, because that's all they do with us. Well, imagine that. Or maybe publishing or arts, right? There's all kinds of different things. It depends on the country. It depends on the country and their relationship to the United States. And it might even have something to do with the UN. Boy, wouldn't that be good? They just kick them bastards out. Wouldn't that be great? Anyway, I'm dreaming. The recommendation shall include an assessment of the effect of the recommended sanctions on the economic and national security interests of the United States and its allies. Okay? So, it's something we keep in mind. We might even consult with them. Any recommended sanctions shall be appropriately calibrated to the scope of the foreign interference identified and may include one or more of the following with respect to each targeted foreign person. 1. Blocking and prohibiting all transactions of a person's property and interests in property subject to United States jurisdiction. 2. Export license restrictions under any statute or regulation that requires the prior review and approval of the United States government as a condition for the export or re-export of goods or services. That's one of the reasons why the Huawei is being not allowed to do business with people in the countryside. Apparently, they're the big 5G people, and they're trying to. I guess they've got kind of a jump on a lot of people on 5G, and they're trying to take over in the countryside here in the U.S. And I know about that. I'm not working with them, but I do work with a company that has brought the internet to us. 3. Prohibitions on United States financial institutions making loans or providing credit to a person. Oh. This is good. I mean, we wanted for so long for a president who's going to actually go after the rich boys that were violating the law. And like with the illegal aliens, right? That they're bringing in all those people to make money. That's slave labor. That is slave labor, pure and simple. Now, who's supporting slave labor? The Democrats. Why? Because they get the votes. Plus, they're also getting the people with the money that are making that money out of that were doing it with the Republicans. Now they're working with the Democrats. This has to stop. And snowflakes, if you can accept that, curse you. Curse you for what you're doing. You're accepting slave labor. Don't give me no excuses. It's upon you. You're not the moral high ground, you're slime. 4. Restrictions on transactions in foreign exchange in which a person has any interest. Good. prohibitions on transfer of credit or payment between financial institutions or by, through, or to any financial institution for the benefit of a person. No money laundering here, pal. 6. Prohibitions on United States persons investing in or purchasing equity in the or debt of a person. No dealing with them. 7. Exclusion of a person's alien corporate officers from the United States. Good. 8. Imposition on a person's alien principal executive officers of any of the sanctions described in this section, or 9. Any other measure authorized by law. Good. Make them pay. Section 4, I hereby determine that the making of donations of the type of articles specified in Section 203B2 of IEEPA, blah, 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 by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order would seriously impair my ability to deal with the national emergency declared in this order. I hereby prohibit such donations as provided by Section 2 of this order. Section 5. Prohibitions in Section 2 of this order include the following. A. The making of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services to, by, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. There's that other executive order that freezes the assets of people involved in corruption and the human trafficking. There are other things that I've read and noted on my Facebook page, but that other that I read on here about the human trafficking, that it is connected to this. I hereby, Section 6, I hereby find that the unrestricted immigrant and non-immigrant entry into the United States of aliens whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, and I hereby suspend entry into the United States as immigrants or non-immigrants of such persons. And they are not allowed to vote. Such persons shall be treated as persons covered by Section 1 of Proclamation of 8693 of July 24th, 2011, suspension of entry of aliens subject to United Nations Security Council travel bans and International Economic Powers Act sanctions. That goes back to Obama as the deportation president. Section 7. Any transaction that evades or avoids and has the purpose of evading or avoiding that causes a violation of or attempts to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is prohibited. B. Any conspiracy formed to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is also prohibited. Section H. For the purpose of this order, A. The term person means individual or entity. Can be a business. Can be a corporation. Can be a lot of different things. Could be a tribe, right? B, the term entity means partnership, association, trust, joint venture, corporation, group, subgroup, or other organization. C, the term United States person means any United States citizen, permanent resident, alien, entity organized under laws of the United States or any jurisdiction of the United States, including foreign branches. See, that's why the 13th Amendment does not cover the anchor babies. They're not under our jurisdiction. They aren't submitted to the power of the United States. So consequently, since they have not, and they're not obeying our laws, then they are not a citizen of the United States. Now, the children can be, but they aren't. But if their children aren't, which is possible that they're not, then they're not citizens. So anchor babies is a term that actually doesn't apply in every case. It can't. not by the definition of the law. D. The term election infrastructure means information and communications technology and systems used by or on behalf of the federal government or a state or local government managing the election process, including voter registration databases, voting machines, voting tabulation equipment, and equipment for the secure transmission of election results. And I'm going to end right there. I think you get an idea of what's going on here. There would be serious repercussions. Keep your eyes out on this. This may hang in the background, but I think it's going to hang in the background on a few challenges to people that are going to be taking seats. I think we're going to see some really unusual stuff happen in the next couple weeks. Until next time.